Well, folks, it's funny. If anyone watched my video yesterday, here we are, July 4th, Independence Day. America, the war on the monarchical system, the end of the British Empire in the United States of America. And who do we see in my talk yesterday? First thing today, morning press release by Jagmeet Singh on CPAC. I just went through it. I wanted to get all the notes down concrete. It is scary. It's terrifying. It's reality of the transition away from a free market society and into communism. And that, my friends, is what Jagmeet Singh just presented nationally in the city of Toronto. GTA, he has a plan for the 2/3 of Canadians that live in the country in that state of unaffordability, rapid inflation, and extreme costs of housing. He says we'll take the federal public land, folks, not the crown lands, which are abundant and clearly throughout the GTA in that 2 hour round trip area. Not the green belt. We're talking crown land. Jagmeet Singh says nothing of that. He goes full blown communist. Tries to make it sound like what I presented yesterday, but it's the absolute communist Beijing opposite. Now, folks, when we look at Hong Kong, I'm going to tell you what's happened in 4 years of Hong Kong. CBC went through it, and they were careful not to display, but they couldn't hide the fact that the busy, cramped, hundreds of thousands pressed into the downtown streets of Hong Kong are no longer there. The Coffin City, the 6 square foot rooms for $3,000 a month don't exist anymore. People have gone out to outside the city. They've left Hong Kong. Hong Kong doesn't support that British Commonwealth Coffin City strategy. You know, the strategy that you can find in the next city, Toronto. And I'm sorry to hurt people and bust these bubbles, but this is a pre-communist design. And they squish more and more people, stack more and more on top of each other, building straight up and continue to cut down the available square feet. In a country like Canada, that should not exist. Not in a normal realm, not in any world sense. When I say that, nearly 96% of the world doesn't operate as Canada does, folks. Canada operates that, and only a handful on one hand other countries operate that way, where they compress as many people into a small amount of land as possible, keeping the rest of the majority of the country for themselves and their wealthy friends. This is the constitutional monarchy, and it doesn't work. Now, there's ways to get around that broken system. Communism has a way. I don't want to give up all my rights, all my property rights, to get out of that. I would rather see the 90% of the country released to the people as private property. Now, Jagmeet Singh doesn't want to do that for Torontonians. He's saying we'll take federal public property meaning taxpayers fund all of it. And he's going to say we're going to release all the taxes from anyone who develops there for subsidized housing. So developers come in and develop cheaper properties for more and more people getting crushed into a smaller area. That's his solution. That solution, folks, means that all the taxpayers of Canada must pool their federal taxes together to subsidize those developments so that people can live what appears to be a subsidized life, so that they can afford to live in their broken system. Folks, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out communist ideas based in pyramid schemes don't work. Because at the end of the day, those on the bottom of the pyramid have nothing. Who builds their subsidized homes? The children of tomorrow will have nothing in Toronto. And the immigration levels are not changing in this country. I've had people speak up against that too and say, we don't want any immigrants here. Well, good luck voting for CPC because they want massive immigration. Not only matching Liberals, but multiplying by many more times, as the Liberals will keep multiplying every year they're in office. And if you think Jagmeet Singh and his communist manifesto agenda to manipulate and trick Canadians is going to work, you're sadly mistaken. And if you think that he is against immigration in some thought process, he's not. He's totally for groundbreaking, ever-expanding immigration. And not once in all of this, for all the parties, do they ever talk about settling the claims of the First Peoples, releasing Crown lands, both federally and provincially, for all peoples as they go on their radical immigration agendas. They don't talk about that because they don't want to do that. They want to stack as many of you as they possibly can, further subdividing, building straight up, and ever increasing every square foot of every major municipality. I don't think there's a Canadian out there over the age of 30 who got into real estate who doesn't understand this to be absolutely true. Now we can say, oh, but so many people are becoming rich when they sell their properties after holding them for so many years. The line, folks, the line has been drawn in the sand. That pyramid scheme is at its end. And to increase the amount on the bottom of the pyramid, even with radical immigration, they've come up with radical borrowing against the generations of tomorrow. Massive deficits and debts by all government levels to make this next layer of the pyramid. That's against all of you. It's an illusion of sustainability. UN sustainable development. Unsustainable development. Who comes up with that? Well, wealthy elites who are laughing all the way to the bank. It's runaway socialism. Even America has been poisoned by this pill. The Democrats are in love with that idea. Many rich socialists, many are tricked, been convinced that somehow these are great economic leaders of our time. That's not the truth. It's a broken system that didn't work many hundreds of years ago. It clearly didn't work for Hong Kong, and it's not going to work in Canada, which again, it blows me away. This monstrosity of land availability called Crown lands, not the federal public lands, not the provincial public lands, not green belt and federal provincial parks, none of that. That's all in the 9%, which of the 9% of Canada that is made available to you, the people, a majority of it rests in the hands of a wealthy elite, many of which are not even Canadian or whom don't reside in Canada but have been made honorary Canadians. Who did that? All of your politicians. Jagmeet Singh has a strategy of pure communism, a transition out of the free market system into communism. He's tricking all Canadians, trying to sound like he presents something like what I'm talking about. But he's talking about, again, federal public lands. That's part of the 9%. Nothing to do, I'm going to say it again, nothing to do with the mass amounts of literally 91% of this country that remains federal and provincial crown lands. You won't find any socialists, any crown loyalists, the fascist socialists, which are all of CPC, all of the Liberals, all of the NDP, and especially the Green Party of Canada. None of them want any of you to have any private property, even though that, historically as we know in America, will generate wealth in the private sector by the citizens of the country. But this country, here we are, July 4th, America's birthday of independence, and throwing away the idea of subject and savage and moving towards the citizen. It's not going to happen here. And all you're going to hear is radical communist, super monarchical loyalists, the pyramid scheme, socialist fascism, and that's all you get. Has it felt like communism all the way through? Of course. I call it pre-cum. Like the act in sex, pre-cum. And I hate to be gross or offensive, but folks, that's what it is. We've been working towards a communist state. And Jagmeet Singh, from my video yesterday to now this video today, clearly that's what he's proposing in our largest major municipality in Canada. And he calls on all the citizens of Canada to band together our federal taxes. And don't worry, if they don't cover it, we'll borrow against the children of tomorrow to meet the demands of today. For the few at the expense of the many. Unsustainable development. And it will lead to a fracture that the government would rather see us enter into communism, because then their regime remains in control. That's where we're going. If anyone doesn't see that after Jagmeet Singh's morning press release, Canada's lost. And for the government media to sponsor that and believe that's a value-added strategy going forward, you might as well just say, Xi Jinping, we're communists and we are going to switch into your system. You're right. The monarchy failed. Let's go full on communist, because we can never, ever allow the common subjects and the defined Indian savages to ever have lands, economies, and a free enterprise of their own creation. We can't allow them to get away from the government regime control, the suppression, the crushing of an entire civilization. And that's what they're doing. They've always been doing it. Share this video, folks, because we're at a critical mass stage in where Canada is today. And if this is adopted or this goes forward via liberals and conservatives, we're going to transform into communism. It's already happening in the media. Folks aren't paying attention. Google's washed their hands of Canada. Meta's leaving to the king of all kings today, Elon Musk, from massive constitutional monarchies in their sickest state the world's ever seen. post-Nazi Germany to the South African apartheid. He escaped all that, ran away right to his next major target, next place to stage, the constitutional monarchy of Canada, where he's moved into the States, pressing all of these economic ideas, largely subsidized by all the taxpayers. Again, we're going to force an economy on you and you're going to subsidize it. And don't worry, if you can't afford it, which we know you can't, we're going to make sure we borrow against all the children of tomorrow and all their children's children to see it done. That's not free enterprise. That's not a free market. That's called a con job in a pyramid scheme. Where do the biggest pyramid schemes in the world come from? They come from constitutional monarchies. They were to be abolished absolutely post-World War II. They haven't. We haven't moved anywhere near where we had to. We made progress. Really, besides South Africa in the 90s, we watched that taper off and taper down. Through the 50s, the 60s, we had some movement. But honestly, folks, we've been going the other way. And we're back to the pyramid scheme. We're seeing it in Canada manifesting. And now we're looking at communist principles and economics to run the GTA. The few at the expense of the many. It's not the rich who are going to pay for it. They're not going to have any of the taxes. They're going to end up owning all those properties, those high rises, and they'll be renting it to the next generations. And as you load up on more immigrants, just like Hong Kong, those subsidized units will not be subsidized anymore, and they will be out of reach for the next generation. Scam, scam, scam. Folks, release the Crown lands federally and provincially. Settle the claims for all the First Peoples. Restore them. Give them self-government, self-determination, and a settlement of the claims. What that would mean for Canadians and real property rights, federally administered by the provinces themselves, codified as they're supposed to be in reality by the provinces themselves. It would mean real sovereignty. With real property rights, you're the economic engine. And we all know Canadians, in a large majority, know how to balance their own budgets. You're always going to have a percentage of the population that will be criminal. You always have those who are irresponsible. But the mass majority of the family units will gravitate to a better state, building, creating, getting stronger, leaving something for the generation of the future. If you codify it right, it can be done. Folks, share this video, get it out, because honestly, we're at a pivotal point. Are we going from the pre-cum to full-on communism? Are we going to give birth to that in the months ahead, the years ahead in Canada? Is the 2030 milestone and into the 2050? Are we just going to put our hands up and say, well, here we are, 2050, full-blown communism? That's what it's looking like to me. And if you have missed it, watch Jagmeet Singh's replay in CPAC today. That is communism. That is destruction of a free market and free enterprise system. Is our version of a free market real? No. Again, I'm going to say it again. Folks, we're crushing more and more record-breaking numbers of immigrants into smaller and smaller areas, never releasing more than 91% of Canada that's been locked away in trust for the politicians and all their wealthy friends. Don't believe the bullshit about First Peoples taking care of the land. First Peoples in Canada sit on 0.2% of Canada. That's it. It's the historical largest genocide, and forced socialist fascist existence ever pressed on a people for the longest running time in world history, modern world history. You won't find examples of this since World War I and World War II as longest running than the First Peoples of Canada. You can argue New Zealand, you can argue Australia and their First Peoples, they fit in there too. But by far, we can look at the First Peoples of Canada getting it the worst. And all in the name of defining and evolving a communism. Hopefully a divine crown communism in their minds, but they'll take communists just to save their own bacon. I'm sorry this isn't the July 4th happy video. I was going to do a whole bunch on America and the monarchy, but Canada is in big, big trouble. If you care, you'll share this video, you'll get it out there. People need to know, they need to wake up. And honestly, as the years go by, it's only going to become ever more clear and ever more present and dangerous for all Canadians. And I don't see the generation of today, my children, I don't see a way out of it for them. Now, the first class, there'll always be a first class, sure, they're not going to be impacted hardly at all. But for the vast majority of Canadians are going to be impacted incredibly harshly in just the next few coming years. And if you think Jagmeet Singh's socialist communist plan of Beijing-style housing is going to work, you're mistaken. That's my video. Bye now.